The scent of mesquite smoke clung to the air, a phantom touch on my skin even miles away from that dusty border town. It always drifted back to me, that smell, like a whispered promise or maybe a warning. It was the smell of him, of Javier. I can still feel the grit of the desert sand between my toes, the way the heat radiated off the adobe walls of his family's cantina. It was a lifetime ago, or so it feels, yet the memory is as sharp as a sliver of glass cutting through the years. It started with a stolen glance, a flicker of recognition across a crowded plaza. He was playing guitar, his fingers dancing over the strings with a passion that mirrored the fire in his eyes. I was with friends, tourists pretending to be locals, trying to soak up the authentic Mexican experience. But the moment our eyes met, the world narrowed down to just him and me. It wasn't just attraction, it was something deeper, a pull I couldn't explain, a feeling like I'd known him in another life. His music shifted, a slow, melancholic melody replacing the lively fiesta tunes. It was a song about lost love, about longing, about the ache in your soul when you're separated from the one you're meant to be with. I understood every note, every word, even though I didn't speak a word of Spanish. He was singing to me, I knew it. Later, under the vast, star-studded sky, we talked. He spoke halting English, and I stumbled through my high school Spanish, but somehow we understood each other perfectly. He told me about his dreams of leaving the small town, of becoming a musician, of finding someone who saw him, really saw him for who he was. I told him about my own restlessness, my feeling of being trapped in a life that wasn't mine. We talked for hours, the moon our only witness, the desert wind our only confidant. He was different from anyone I'd ever met. He was raw, authentic, passionate. He was everything I wasn't and everything I yearned to be. That night, under a sky so thick with stars you could almost touch them, something ignited between us. It was a spark, a flame, a wildfire waiting to be unleashed. We shared a kiss, a tentative touch at first, then a desperate embrace that spoke volumes of unspoken desires. It was a kiss that tasted of tequila and longing, a kiss that promised a future neither of us could have imagined. But even in that moment of pure bliss, a shadow lingered. A sense of foreboding, a whisper of what was to come. I knew deep down that our story wouldn't be easy. There were too many obstacles, too many differences, too much at stake. But for that one night under the Mexican stars, I allowed myself to believe in the possibility of something real, something magical. I allowed myself to fall in love. The next few days were a whirlwind. We spent every waking moment together, exploring the hidden corners of the town, sharing stories, dreams, and secrets. He showed me his favorite spot by the river, a secluded oasis where the water shimmered like liquid silver under the midday sun. We swam naked, the cool water a stark contrast to the scorching desert heat. His touch was electric, igniting a fire within me I never knew existed. We talked about everything and nothing, our conversations flowing effortlessly between English and Spanish, punctuated by laughter and shared silences. He taught me how to play a few chords on his guitar, his fingers brushing against mine, sending shivers down my spine. I taught him some English slang, laughing at his pronunciation and his amused confusion. He introduced me to his family, a boisterous and welcoming bunch who embraced me as one of their own. His mother, a woman with kind eyes and a warm smile, made me her famous tamales, the spicy aroma filling the small kitchen. His father, a weathered man with a twinkle in his eye, shared stories of his youth, regaling us with tales of adventure and mischief. I felt like I belonged there in that small, dusty town, surrounded by the warmth of his family and the intensity of his love. But even amidst the joy and the laughter, the shadow of reality loomed. My vacation was coming to an end. I had to go back home, back to my life, back to the world that felt so distant and unreal compared to the magic I had found in Mexico. The thought of leaving Javier was unbearable. We talked about it, our voices hushed, the weight of the inevitable pressing down on us. He spoke of coming to America, of finding a job, of building a life together. I wanted to believe it was possible, but a part of me doubted. My life back home was complicated, filled with expectations and responsibilities that felt suffocating. I hadn't come out to my family, and the thought of their reaction to Javier, to our love, filled me with dread. I knew they wouldn't understand. They wouldn't understand the connection we shared, the depth of our feelings. They would see only the differences, the barriers, the impossibility of it all, but I couldn't bear the thought of losing him. He was everything I had ever wanted, everything I had ever dreamed of. He was my soulmate, my other half, the missing piece of my heart. The night before I left, we sat under the same star-studded sky where we had first met. The air was thick with unspoken emotions, the silence heavy with the weight of our impending separation. He held me close, his arms wrapped tightly around me as if he could somehow stop time, as if he could hold on to me forever. We made promises, whispered vows of love and commitment, promises that felt both sacred and fragile. He gave me a small, hand-carved wooden bird, a symbol of freedom, a reminder of our love. I gave him my favorite t-shirt, the one I always wore when I felt most myself. We knew it wouldn't be easy, but we clung to the hope that somehow, someday, we would find a way to be together. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, the moment of truth arrived. The bus pulled up, its engine rumbling, a stark reminder of the world outside our bubble of love. We shared one last kiss, a kiss filled with desperation, longing, and the promise of a future that seemed both so close and so far away. As I boarded the bus, I looked back at him, standing there in the dusty street, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. I knew I was leaving a part of myself behind, a part that would forever belong to him, to that small town, to the magic we had found under the Mexican stars. The return home was a blur. The familiar streets, the familiar faces felt alien, disconnected. Everything seemed muted, dull, lacking the vibrant colors and passionate energy of Mexico. I went through the motions, attending classes, hanging out with friends, but my heart remained in that dusty border town with Javier. I replayed our moments together in my mind, clinging to the memories like a lifeline. The scent of mesquite smoke, the sound of his guitar, the feel of his touch, these sensations became my refuge, a way to escape the emptiness that had settled within me. I called him every chance I could, the crackling phone line a fragile connection to the world I longed to be a part of. We talked about everything and nothing, sharing the mundane details of our lives, trying to bridge the distance that separated us. He told me about his music, about the gigs he was playing at local bars, about his dreams of recording an album. I told him about my classes, about my friends, about the pressure I felt to conform to the expectations of my family. But beneath the surface of our conversations, there was always an unspoken tension, a fear that our connection was fading, that the distance was too much to overcome. My family noticed the change in me. They saw the sadness in my eyes, the way I withdrew from their world. They asked questions, probing gently, trying to understand what was wrong. I deflected, offering vague excuses, afraid to reveal the truth. I knew they wouldn't understand. My mother, with her traditional values and her carefully curated image of our family, would be horrified. My father, with his pragmatic approach to life, would dismiss it as a youthful infatuation, a fleeting romance. The thought of their disapproval, their disappointment, was a weight I couldn't bear. So I kept my secret, burying it deep within my heart, nurturing it in the shadows. But the secret grew heavier with each passing day, a constant reminder of the life I was living and the life I yearned for. One evening, while talking to Javier on the phone, I heard a commotion in the background. His voice was strained, his words rushed. He told me about a local gang that had been harassing him, threatening him to stop playing at their favorite bar. They didn't like his music, they said. They didn't like his kind. My blood ran cold. I felt a wave of fear wash over me, a primal instinct to protect him. I begged him to be careful, to stay away from trouble. He tried to reassure me, telling me it was nothing, just a bunch of petty thugs, but I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. I knew that something was wrong. I knew that our love was being threatened, not just by distance and societal pressures, but by something far more dangerous. I felt trapped, helpless, miles away from him, unable to protect him, unable to offer him the support he needed. The phone call ended abruptly, the line going dead in the middle of our conversation. I tried calling back, but there was no answer. I spent the rest of the night in a state of panic, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. I imagined him being attacked, hurt, even killed. The fear was paralyzing, a cold fist clenching around my heart. I knew I couldn't stay here any longer, pretending that everything was okay. I had to go back to him, I had to protect him, I had to fight for our love no matter the cost. The decision was made, I had to go back. I packed a bag, throwing in a few essentials, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum. I knew this wouldn't be easy. Facing my family, explaining everything, it was a daunting task. But the fear for Javier outweighed any other concern. I had to reach him, had to know he was safe. I left a note for my parents, a brief explanation, a plea for understanding. I couldn't face them directly, not yet. The words felt inadequate, insufficient to convey the depth of my love for Javier, the urgency of the situation. I booked the first flight I could find, my hands shaking as I entered my credit card information. The flight felt like an eternity, each minute stretching into an hour, each hour an agonizing wait. I stared out the window, watching the clouds drift by, my mind filled with images of Javier, of his smile, his touch, his music. I prayed that he was okay, that he was safe. When I finally arrived in Mexico, I rushed to his town, my heart pounding with each step. The familiar streets, once a source of comfort, now felt charged with a sense of foreboding. I went straight to his family's cantina, the place where we had first met. The cantina was empty, the chairs stacked on the tables, the air thick with silence. I asked his mother about him, my voice trembling. Her eyes were filled with tears, her face etched with worry. She told me that Javier had been missing for 2 days. The gang had come back to the bar, more aggressive this time. They had threatened him, and when he refused to back down, they had taken him away. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt a wave of nausea, a dizzying mix of fear and despair. I asked her if the police were involved. She shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. She said the police in their town were corrupt, that they wouldn't help. I knew I had to find him, I had to do something. I couldn't just stand there, paralyzed by fear. I went to the local bars, the places where Javier used to play. I showed his picture to the bartenders, the waitresses, anyone who might have seen him. No one had any information. The search felt hopeless, a desperate attempt to find a needle in a haystack. I wandered the streets, calling his name, my voice hoarse. The desert wind carried my cries away, a mournful echo in the empty streets. As darkness fell, I found myself back at the cantina, sitting on the steps, my head in my hands. I felt lost, alone, completely helpless. His mother came out, offering me a cup of tea. We sat in silence, the only sound the chirping of crickets. She told me about Javier's dreams, his aspirations, his hopes for the future. She told me about his kindness, his generosity, his unwavering belief in the power of music. Her words were a reminder of what was at stake, of the beautiful soul I was fighting for. I knew I couldn't give up. I had to keep searching, I had to keep fighting. For Javier, for our love, for the future we had dreamed of. I decided to go to the police station despite his mother's warnings. I had to try something. I walked into the dimly lit station, my heart pounding with a mixture of hope and trepidation. I told the officer about Javier's disappearance, about the gang's threats. He listened, his expression indifferent, his eyes filled with skepticism. He told me they would look into it, but I could tell he wasn't taking me seriously. I left the station feeling more discouraged than ever. I knew I was on my own. I had to find Javier no matter the cost. Driven by a desperate hope, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I remembered Javier mentioning a secluded spot in the desert, a place where he went to find peace and inspiration. It was a long shot, but it was the only lead I had. I rented a car, an old, beat-up sedan, and drove out into the vast expanse of the desert. The landscape was desolate, unforgiving, the sun beating down mercilessly. I followed the vague directions Javier had given me, relying on my intuition and a tattered map. Hours passed, the sun beginning to set, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple. Just as I was about to give up, I saw a small, dilapidated shack nestled among the rocks. It was the place Javier had described. My heart pounded in my chest as I approached the shack, a mix of hope and dread swirling within me. I cautiously opened the door, stepping into the dimly lit interior. The shack was sparsely furnished, a single bed, a small table, a few musical instruments scattered around, and then I saw him. Javier was tied to a chair, his face bruised and swollen. He was conscious, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and relief when he saw me. The gang members were nowhere to be seen. They had left him there, thinking they had silenced him. I rushed to him, my hands trembling as I untied him. He was weak, disoriented, but alive. We embraced, a desperate hug that spoke volumes of our love and our fear. He told me they had threatened him, tried to force him to leave town, to abandon his music. When he refused, they had beaten him and brought him to the shack. He had feared the worst, but he had never given up hope. As I helped him to his feet, I heard a noise outside. The gang members had returned. We knew we had to escape. I grabbed Javier's hand and we ran out of the shack, the sound of their angry shouts echoing behind us. We ran through the desert, the darkness our only cover. We didn't stop running until we reached the car. I started the engine and we sped away, leaving the shack and the gang behind us. We drove through the night, not knowing where we were going, just wanting to get away to find a safe place to hide. We ended up in a small motel in a neighboring town. We were exhausted, shaken, but we were together. The next morning, we went to the police, this time in a different town, a place where the authorities were more receptive. We told them everything about the gang, about the threats, about Javier's kidnapping. They took our statements, promising to investigate. We knew it wouldn't be easy, that the gang members might still be out there, but we had taken the first step towards justice. We stayed in the motel for a few days, allowing Javier to recover. I took care of him, tending to his wounds, comforting him, reassuring him that everything would be all right. We talked about our future, about our dreams. We knew that our life together wouldn't be easy, that there would be challenges ahead, but we were determined to face them together. Javier decided to leave the small town to pursue his music in a bigger city, a place where he would be safe, where he could be himself. I decided to go with him. I knew I couldn't go back to my old life, not after everything that had happened. I had found my true self in Mexico with Javier. I had found my love, my purpose, my future. We left the small town behind, driving towards a new beginning, a future filled with hope, love, and the promise of a life together, a life where we could be free to be ourselves, free to love each other under the stars just like we were meant to be. The scent of mesquite smoke would always be a reminder of where we came from, of the challenges we overcame, but it would also be a reminder of the love that brought us together, a love that burned brighter than any star in the Mexican sky.